I get thousands of people reaching out to me, asking what they should expect at the closing. I mean, they've already gone through years and months of home shopping, and then they finally get down to the last 4 to 6 weeks when you're putting offers in on homes. Now you've got nerve-wracking and nail-biting happening because you've got offers, negotiations, inspections, all of that culminating in the last couple of days when you sign your life away to actually get the keys. So how would you like to be beyond, over and above, prepared for that moment so there are no surprises for you? Well, let's get you there.
How to Buy a Home educates, protects, and connects first-time home buyers to qualified vetted realtors in their area. Whether you're looking for DIY information or step-by-step guidance, How to Buy a Home is the #1 resource for first-time home buyers.
What is happening, my How to Buy a Homies? I'm David Sidoni, and yes, this is your all-inclusive everything you need to know about being a first-time home buyer podcast. Every question you could ever ask, it's all answered here. All you have to do is put up with being called a homie and then listening to this cringy old man talk about unicorns. I know, it's kind of a lot to take, but hey, I deal in facts and the facts don't lie. And this is the #1 place to get all the information you need. And the proof is in the thousands of homies who are sitting right now in the homes that they purchase. So let's get you there. All right, you know how some people hate the word moist? Well, when it comes to the closing process on your home, there's one word to describe the process. That gross word, fluid. Closing on a home is fluid. Remember that, because everything is fluid. From the closing costs that you're going to pay to the actual date that you close on the home, it's all fluid. So fully embracing the fluidity of the closing process is going to assure you that you don't get a horror story surprise in the last few days. Ruining come on, this is supposed to be one of the hallmark achievements of your life. So to you specifically organized people out there, you anal spreadsheet types, I'm just giving you fair warning, you are totally going to hate this. But as your protector, your first-time home buying unk, I'm here to tell you that this is the game and this is how it's played and you cannot avoid it. So let me start with the definition of what closing on a home means. The closing is when the sale of the home is final. Technically, a closing sometimes is also called a settlement. That's the time when a property is legally sold and transferred from the seller to the buyer. It involves the delivery of the deed, financial adjustments, the signing of a note, and the disbursement of the funds necessary to close the sale or the loan transaction. So that's the what of what happens. But before we get into the big details on the what, let's talk about the when. The closing date, it's not absolute. So your date that you sign for that you think is when you're going to close, it is not an absolute. Yes, you heard me correct. Even though literally used correctly, hundreds of thousands of dollars are being exchanged. And even though the buyers and sellers are figuring out where are they going to sleep that day? And when do they get moving trucks sent to their home or their apartment? What do they do about their leases and packing and unpacking? Well, they set a date and they set it over a month ahead of time. But the truth of the matter is the actual people who facilitate closing the home on that date, the people who exchange the deeds and record the home sales, they look at the closing date on the contract as a target, which means you guessed it, it's fluid. So I'm just giving you fair warning, don't look at it as set in stone. There are tons of moving parts to facilitate a closing, and most of them, you don't have any control over. So the advice is this, remember, you can do everything right, but you are just one of dozens of different factors that determine if you close on time. Issues are gonna happen. Loans are gonna need an extra day or two, or sometimes a week. The seller's moving truck is going to be delayed in Boise, or the termite tent is going to need a few extra days on the home, and then you need a few extra days to air it out after a fumigation. And that is just an extremely small sample of some of the things that could happen. So you got it? Plan on the closing date to move. And if it doesn't, cool. Then you do what my clients did. They had extra time built in, and when they found out that they did officially close on time, they met me at the home. I gave them the keys, and then they let their 4-year-old run around the backyard of an empty house. And then they ordered pizza and then a picnic on their floor. Then they decided, well, the house is empty. We still got a little wiggle room here. And they set up painters, movers, and everything else. Now, if you're so tight on the purchase that you can't factor in a week of overlap between the two places that you've got, to give yourself a safety cushion, maybe you're too tight on a purchase this big anyway. It's a little harsh, but I told you I'm going to deal in facts. Make sure you can afford that space. Okay, what are your action steps so that you can avoid any nightmare situation? What are the things that you can control on your end to make sure that at least you are not going to be the reason for the holdup in a closing? First up, don't ever plan your lease to end on the day before your closing. And don't ever have your last day in your apartment be the same day that you're supposed to get the keys to your new home. Have at least a week of overlap. And in fact, I often recommend at least 2 weeks. Now, if you know this fact 6 months or a year before you're ready to begin your home shopping, well, then you can financially prepare for this and put that into your budget. This crossover time or the buffer time, the overlap time, 2 weeks of that, it makes for a far less painful moving in experience. So plan that overlap. There are hundreds of things that could delay that date. So you'll need that overlap. Have a nice crossover. That way, your living situation is all set, and for sure you won't be homeless. Remember, it's fluid. Never count on the closing date as a sure thing. And don't plan a party the day that you're expected to get your keys. And don't have your parents fly in to meet you on an expected day and assume that that day is going to work. And don't order a moving truck and have all your belongings packed away unless you can cover a little extra time. And don't drive cross town or cross country expecting that for sure you're going to have a place to sleep when you get there. Another little tip is make sure that you put all the utilities in your name at least a week before your scheduled moving date. And I do ask you to budget for this too. Oftentimes, the seller might move out early, and you know what they do? They turn off the utilities. And I've been doing this long enough to see some tight-ass frugal buyer decide they're not going to change utilities in their name until the very last day, all just to save a few bucks. Only to find out that the sellers were even more of a tight-ass than they were, and they moved out early and turned off the utilities the night before. Now, yeah, I'm going to tell you to over-prepare and be ready for anything. But I can tell you this, quite often, sometimes the fluidity of the situation, it works in your favor. A lot of times, we close early before the original agreed-upon closing date. And when that happens, guess what? Yep, the sellers are going to turn off the utilities. Trust me on this one, gang. Sometimes the reconnect fees, they're hundreds of dollars, and they can take a full week to get things turned on. And you're going to wish that you'd spent the 84 cents a day for that damn water bill. Okay, next up, here's a big tip to help you avoid the crushing and all too common denial of your loan, which sometimes happens just days before the closing. Now, wait a minute. Maybe you're thinking, what? David, how can that be true? Surely a buyer has to have a full loan approval to even enter the contract 30 days earlier. Yes, you're right about that. But when it goes through underwriting, that loan approval can get overturned and denied just before your closing, and the buyers are crushed. It's the worst nightmare ever. So one thing to keep in mind about the closing is that most people, when they're buying a home, they're stretching their loan approval as far as it can go, which means there's no room for any changes, no wiggle room for any new items on your debt sheet, anything that could change your DTI. I mean, even little purchases while you're under contract could truly upend your DTI, and your loan approval can turn into a loan denial. And then you cancel the purchase, which in some cases means you might even lose your deposit. And this can happen as close to the closing as a day before you're supposed to get the keys. So the rule is this: do not do anything financial while you're seriously shopping for a home, and especially while you're under contract for a home, without talking to your lender first to see how those purchases or changes in your finances will affect your loan approval. Period. The end curtain. I mean, don't even add a new streaming service without calling your lender. That is the rule. Period. The end. Curtain. Don't apply for a credit card. Don't apply for a furniture card, which a lot of people like to do because they're getting excited. And don't apply for a loan of any kind, especially while you're under contract. Don't purchase or agree to purchase anything with an existing credit card or even with cash. Don't charge a vacation. Don't buy a new car. And don't buy anything out of the ordinary when you're in the process of buying a home. Don't pre-buy anything for the home, the furniture, the appliances, and that means your fridge, your washer and dryer. Don't buy paint, and don't buy anything beyond groceries and gas without talking to your lender first. This is all for your protection. I don't want you to have that horrible horror story of getting denied just days before the closing. And here's a little bonus tip on that. This extends to when you close. Now, you're going to sign the loan documents a couple days before you close, and a lot of people feel like that's the closing. They sign the documents, but that's not the closing. It could be 24, 48, 72 hours between the time you sign and you actually record with the county. And if one of these weird purchases changes your DTI and you get unapproved, denied, well, doesn't matter that you've signed the documents, they can still cancel. The documents have to be processed and funded. So no matter what, call your lender first, anything money, when you're in a deal. Okay, next up, let's talk the money, the closing costs. Closing costs are absolutely the most confusing part of real estate. I'm telling you, this I've seen for 2 decades. And you, my anal specific planners, you spreadsheet lovers, this is going to make your brain hurt. You cannot and you will not get a good answer on this. No matter how many people you talk to and no matter how much research you do, it is never going to be specific. So you can't bring that to the table. It is never going to be specific. They can't tell you exactly how much your closing costs are going to be. In fact, you don't get a real number until you are fully committed, under contract, do your inspection, do your appraisal, and you're just days before you close. That's the only time when you're buying a home, you get the actual specific down to the dollar number of your closing costs. So let that sink in. Now, let me be the voice of reason in what obviously is a totally unreasonable system. It doesn't make sense. And everyone tells you while you're preparing to buy a home, hey, once you get your down payment figured out, you got to save for that. And you're like, cool, that's exact. Or close to exact, because you can do, I want to do 3% or 5% on a $400,000 home. Now, you know, if you go to a $425,000 home, that number's going to change. But even then, once you get a price, you know exactly how much it's going to be. On the flip side, when you ask someone about closing costs, you get an estimated answer with a huge spread, a giant difference. Sometimes a spread as much as $3,000, $5,000, or even $10,000, depending on the price of the home that you're purchasing. And no, that's not the total. $3,000, $5,000, or $10,000, that's the spread of the estimate. You know, like it could cost anywhere from $10,000 to $13,000, or it could be $15,000 to $20,000, or it could be $30,000 to $40,000 if you've got a higher priced home. Anywhere in between that. So, you know, just give or take, just make sure you've got $10,000 lying around in the house. So yes, that can make it really tough for first-time homebuyers to know exactly how much they need to save. So again, let me be the first to agree with all you out there. Yes, this sucks. I have nothing but empathy for anyone trying to get a handle on how much money that you need to save to purchase your first home. So here's the deal. I'm on your side, and I'm going to do my best to try to clarify this for you. So let's start with this fact. A lot of people don't explain this to you guys well enough. Closing costs are estimated, approximated, and for sure not exact. It's the way it works. You can't change it. Don't shoot the messenger. Just be glad you're a homie and you're learning about this now. And I know some of you are sitting there thinking, this guy can't be right. I'm going to research it. Well, if you Google it, I got to tell you, you will not get the answers you're looking for. And I can explain to you why. When I say to you that closing costs range from 2 to 3% of your purchase price, that's an on average, I can't tell you what it's going to be. And then to freak you out even more, neither can your local unicorn realtor or your lender or the escrow people or the title people or the real estate attorneys or your super smart uncle who's bought 6 houses. Nobody can give you the exact numbers because of the way the system works. and you don't get those numbers, the final closing exact amount due until you're very close to the closing date. Already on a contract for a long time, you don't get it until like days before you're supposed to close. So yes, your perfect spreadsheet, it's going to have one giant question mark line item, and it's probably one of the biggest line items on your sheet. So let's take a look at how this ambiguous number gets broken down. I'm only giving you the generic overview. You will find out as you hear all about this that the only way to feel comfortable with this is to have a local expert real estate support team, someone who is unicorn-like or a unicorn themselves. All right, here's the breakdown. First, you have money out during the process of buying a home before you calculate your closing costs, which, as a reminder, are tabulated just days before the closing. So this money out is money due in order to go through the process, but it's not considered to be part of what they call your closing costs. It's money that you pay out before the closing, starting the day that you have an offer accepted. In most states and provinces, you have to put down an earnest money deposit. It's also known as a good faith deposit. In some states like North Carolina, they also have a due diligence fee. And oftentimes that is non-refundable fee that allows the buyer to back out at any time during the due diligence period. So again, check with your local unicorn to get your state laws. Also, the amount of this earnest money deposit, that is going to vary from area to area. In a non-competitive market, I know sometimes people put anywhere from 1% to 2% down, but like in California, when it's competitive, you best be putting down the maximum, which is 3% in California. So this deposit is money that you have to put out. The good news is you just take it from your down payment fund. It's earmarked to be added to the down payment when you officially decide to purchase the home after your inspections and the appraisal. So technically it's not a closing cost, but it is money that you need to be prepared to put out once your offer gets accepted. That money is not your closing cost. It's the first installment of your total down payment. Now, next up are a couple of fees that you pay during your contract period that, again, are not part of your closing costs. But chronologically, these happen next. Considering the fact it's money coming out of your pocket and a fee you have to pay, I want to make sure you know about it. Since I can't give you the exact number on your closing costs, at least I can let you know these other things are happening, and they're not closing costs. It could be anywhere from, could be around $1,000 to $2,000 or $3,000. You've got two non-refundable fees that happen during your due diligence, contingency, buyer beware, inspection period. You know, that time when you can still back out of the deal and get back your earnest money deposit. These two things, most of the time you're going to end up doing, and they're non-refundable. You can't get the money back on these. So you need this cash during the contract period. They're your inspection fees and your appraisal fees. These particular exact fees can vary. Your home inspection, which is a general home inspection, it could be anywhere from $500 to $900 depending on the size of your home. And if you want to get a sewer inspection with your general inspection, that can be anywhere from $200 to $300. Anything for extra detailed inspections, like if you do the general inspection, you find out you need to get deeper into like your septic, your geological information, surveys on the property, or a detailed roof or foundation or plumbing or electrical inspection. For that, you're going to need to check with your Unicorn Pro, find another vendor, and those fees will be on top of the general inspection and the sewer inspection. Most people in California, they do a general inspection and a sewer. And if the general calls for more detailed inspections, they'll do them. But a lot of times that ends up being exactly what they need. And the second money that you pay out of pocket before you get to your closing costs that's non-refundable, even if you bail on the deal, that's your appraisal fee. Appraisals work to anybody that needs to use a loan to buy a home. And since most of you do, you're going to need that appraisal. This is for the bank to verify the value of the home. They only want to issue a loan for the appraised value, not above that. And that appraisal needs to be done by a neutral third party. And the whole reason for the appraisal is that if you buy the home and then the day after you buy it, you get hit by a bus while you're dancing in the street to celebrate the fact that you bought a new home, well, that means the bank would be on the hook for whatever value the loan was at. So they want to make sure it's not over the true value of the home so they get appraised. I mean, think about it. Otherwise, you could just, in a bidding war, offer $25,000 more than the real value of the home to make sure that your offer gets accepted. That's no biggie to you if you get the house, because that extra 25 grand doesn't cost you that much more a month. But if you're dancing in the street and you're roadkill the day after you own it, well, now the bank owns a home, but the home that they own, their loan is worth more than the home is worth. So they have to make sure that they're protected. Unless you end up waiving your appraisal, which is a tactic that you can discuss with your unicorn realtor, you're going to be paying for an appraisal. It's usually $450 to $800 for the average first-time home buyer. Okay, what are we, 20, 30 minutes in? Now it's time for the breakdown of the actual closing costs to help you understand what they could be and why they cannot be exact. The uncertainty comes from the fact that closing costs are made up of two types of fees. The first fee types are the set fees, service fees that you can calculate pretty exactly. The second types are moving parts fees. On top of that, they're different in every state and different depending on exactly the day that you close, because they're related to calendar events. The set fees are called non-recurring closing costs, and the ones that vary based on your state and the date of when you close, those are called recurring costs. That's vocabulary, so you know when people talk about non-recurring and recurring. The non-recurring closing costs, those set fees, those include your escrow and or your title company costs, or your closing company costs, or your attorney costs, and those are different depending on where you live. You have different entities that help you with the closing. Now, you're also going to have your loan costs and your lender fees and any other upfront loan fees, depending on the specific type of loan product or the options that you choose. So again, even the set fees, we can know them well ahead of time, but they have plenty of variables. Now to get to the confusing part, the recurring closing costs. Now, for my anal friends, this is the one that's going to bust your brain and give you hives and tons of anxiety. This is where it gets really funky. Why? Well, because they're all related to the calendar days of the payment of these costs. And the ground zero date, that closing date, what have we learned about it? It's fluid. So you won't get those exact calculations till 72 hours, sometimes even 48 hours before you close on the home. Here's the how and the why of the non-recurring. Understanding how it can vary by truly thousands of dollars, making estimating your closing costs impossible until you are super deep into your contract. The first one is part of your closing costs involve your first mortgage payment. It's going to be a prepayment for the remaining days in the month that you close on the home. So if you close near the front of the month, at the closing, you have to pay the per diem of the remaining days of the month of your mortgage payment. So like if you closed on the 8th of the month, you have to pay 22 days worth of your mortgage as part of what they call your closing costs. Now, how on earth can everybody get an estimate on their closing costs if a portion of your payment is how many days till the end of the month? Someone closes on the 8th, it's going to be wildly different to someone who closes on the 28th. I mean, imagine that your mortgage is $5,000 or even $3,000. Well, 22 days worth of $3,000 is a lot of money versus 2 days of $3,000. So that's why there could be a huge swing into the thousands. And especially you have to keep an eye on it, because what if you're set for the 28th and because the closing dates are fluid, you end up moving to the 4th or the 5th of the next month because there's a problem with the loan, or there's a problem with the seller selling their house, or there's a problem with the moving truck. And because we know closing dates are fluid, this is why. So that's the big one, the mortgage payment. That's a recurring cost. But truly, that's just the beginning, because there are other things that you're continually going to have to pay, like your HOA dues or homeowners insurance. And with those things, in some places, it's 6 months prepaid as part of your closing costs. And sometimes it can be up to a year. Now, that's definitely going to up your total that you owe with what they call your closing costs. And you don't get those numbers until you're under contract. So we can't figure it out 3 months, 2 months, even a month before you start putting offers on homes. And then when it comes to the city fees, some of those have to be prepaid, and that can be something different. Only you can know when you're working with someone who's already done a lot of these with the city and get those exact numbers for you. And then we come to another biggie, the taxes. Taxes could be a gigantic swing in how much money you owe. And it depends on where you land on the tax payment calendar. This isn't, days of the month. This is by months of the year. So you have to prepay some of your property taxes. And it's different for every state. And that's different depending on the day that you close. This could be super huge if you're in a state where you have to pay multiple months of taxes before you close on the home. Or not so bad if you're closing in a month where you only have to pay 1 month's worth of taxes in order to transfer the property to you or close on the home. This difference in when you buy the home could be the difference in thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars for your total closing costs. And again, all of those fees can't be calculated until you have the exact calendar day that you're going to close on the home and record with your local county, and that day's fluid. So in summary, closing costs are estimated, approximated, and for sure, not exact. Oh, and wait a minute. I forgot. I didn't even mention something else that I covered back in episode 87. There are 50 states and 3,143 counties in the United States. And they all have different ways to conduct and calculated what is needed for what they call the conveyance of a property, which is a fancy word for giving you the title of the home so you own it. So in each area, the fees vary, and it depends on who you need to facilitate that conveyance of the property in your specific state and county. So yet again, another reason why you need a super rad and bitchin' unicorn team to help you with your closing, because there's no generic answers on closings, as the fees not only vary because of the calendar date, but they vary from region to region. I read through the conveyance practices in all 50 states, and it's mind-boggling at how different it is all over the place. California people can't even agree on a single way to conduct a real estate transaction in the state. It's totally different in Northern California versus Southern California. And within our own state, it varies wildly from county to county. So depending on exactly where you are buying a home, there could be fees for escrow companies, closing companies, title companies, attorneys, document and transfer fees, tax transfer fees, and title insurance premiums. Now, sometimes the buyer and seller split the closing costs 50-50. In some places, it's 75-25, some in favor of the buyer, some in favor of the seller. And in many places, it's a standard practice that each person, the buyer and the seller, pay their own closing costs. There is some good news about closing costs for you. Here in 2025, it just came out here at the end of May that 50% of the sellers right now are offering what we call concessions. Most of the time, that's in the form of a credit from their profits of their sale, and they give a cash credit to you, the buyer. Most all the time, this is commonly used to cover your closing costs. And that way, it's just you get money from them and you keep that cash in your pocket. And that can help with the new mortgage payment going down the line, or you can do some repairs for items that you notated when you did the inspection on the home and told the seller about them. Or maybe you can use that cash to do some new upgrades on your home. So make sure you have a super bitchin' unicorn real estate team to write that offer and see if you can get a concession for yourself. They've done this before, they know the drill, and they can help you get the best deal. And of course, when it comes to these gosh darn closing costs, look, no one can get it perfect, but when you're working with the experienced team, they can give you the closest estimate. And be ready, be flexible. Now, let me give you a few more things about the act of the closing when you get to it. It's just a brief preview, so when you get to these things, you'll have heard about it at least once. And keep in mind, if you've got a quality real estate support team, they're going to walk you through everything. But hey, maybe you've even heard about it once. The closing disclosure. Now, this comes a few days before you close. Sometimes it's known as a CD, a closing disclosure. This is the document that tells you the final terms on your loan. This is it. This is when you get those real down to the penny numbers that you are so longing for. It's a required 5-page form that provides final details about the mortgage loan that you've selected, including the loan terms, the closing costs, your projected monthly payment, and how much you got to pay in fees and other costs to get your mortgage. So this comes from the lender. The lender is legally required to give it to you, and they give you at least 3 days to review the entire closing disclosure before you sign the loan. But remember, you sign the loan just a couple of days before you close. So this time when you actually get it, it's about 5 days before you close is when you finally get the number you've been waiting for. And keep in mind, at that point, you've already negotiated and got accepted on the home. You've been under contract for like 3 or 4 weeks. You've done your inspection and your appraisal, done, paid for. You've got boxes packed. And this moment, this is when you finally get the accurate number in your closing costs. And then to make it even more messy, since the closing dates are fluid, as we've talked about, even though they send you the CD, if it moves a day or two, those numbers change, even from that closing disclosure final end-all be-all document. The good news is if it just changes a day or two, it only changes as much as the daily per diem for each item, which usually doesn't amount to that much. For you accuracy freaks, this is not going to make you happy, but this is the way it works with a fluid transaction that's calculated down to the penny for those daily costs. Okay, the next thing is a huge warning. I want you to hear this now, keep it in the back of your mind, and hopefully as you get close to closing, you're going to get this warning multiple times. This is about wiring money. This is monumentally important in the new world of electronic money. When you get close to the closing, you're going to need to give them money to buy the house. Most closing companies don't take a bag of cash. So most of the time you end up wiring the money, right? This is the biggest money wire of your entire life. And it's going to be sent to the banks. And it's going to be crucial that you do so in a timely manner. So the scammers, they know that. And they are ready with really good stuff to take advantage of you as you're trying to quickly make sure that you're wiring the money so your deal closes on time. And the deal with the wire is if the scammers get you to send it to them instead of to the right place the wire's supposed to go, it's gone and you can't get it back. The scammers are going to copy letterhead and logos and email templates from the attorneys, the title company, the escrow, the closing companies. They're going to make up email addresses that look official. They're even going to put new phone numbers at the bottom for you to call, and they're going to answer it and sound official. What do? You avoid these scams by calling the people that you've been working with for the last 30 days and get them to verify the wires. That's just a little bonus. Keep that in mind. There it is, homies. The comprehensive total, everything you ever wanted to know about closing and everything that is always going to piss you off because you can't get a definitive answer on closing costs. But now that you know, you won't be as pissed. What's the answer? Overestimate, oversave, be ready to go. A lot of times, and I mean a lot of times, these things work out okay. In fact, if you're using Unicorn Team, they tend to work out really well. Maybe a closing happens early. Maybe the lender figures out a way to save some money. Maybe you figure out that if you want to close on a different date, you might ask the seller if they do it and they do it. Maybe that saves you $1,000 in your closing costs because of those recurring closing costs. So get the right team, get the right people, make sure you've got other experienced people walking you through this because I've been doing this 20 years. I've been on the microphone for 6 years now, and I still can't give you an exact answer. And that's just the way it is. So know it, be ready, and you'll be able to find the little wins in there because you're prepared for it. If you want to grab your own team and get this started, go to howtobuyahome.com. This talk about the closing is great. It's optimistic. It's exciting. But you can't get to the closing until you start the planning. So jump on howtobuyahome.com. You can even just ask me a question there, and I can help guide you in the correct way to get started. We're really excited that even though the market is kind of rough right now in 2025, we're seeing thousands of first-time homebuyers come through and get their plan started. Sure, I can tell you all the stories about the people who closed on the home, but I'm right now more excited about the people who are starting their plans. Don't wait. There's too much for you to learn if you're thinking, well, I want to learn it all before I call somebody. Did you just hear this podcast? There is so much that entails the process of buying a home. There's no way you're ever going to learn it all where you're going to feel confident to move forward. So grab your team, let them make you feel confident. And if they're a good team, if you tell them you don't know enough right now and you want to put on the brakes, they're going to be fine with that. Work smart, get your information, and homies, you can do this.
Looking for more DIY education or your own personal step-by-step guidance through the home buying journey? Since 2019, How to Buy a Home has been the #1 resource for first-time home buyers. So visit howtobuyaHome.com to get started.